Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm really excited to bring you a Kickstarter preview of Lanzerath Ridge, The Battle of the Bulge. This is the 4th entry in the Valiant Defense series by David Thompson. I'm not being compensated for this preview. I was just sent a prototype copy, but I will disclose that David Thompson is a close friend of mine. And I'm also a big fan of the previous games in the series, starting with Pavlov's house and going through to Castle Itter and soldiers in Postmen's uniforms. I'm particularly excited to show you this one because I think it represents some very interesting updates to the system to keep it fresh. And as you can see, the graphic design has gotten a bit of an overhaul that I find very aesthetically pleasing. So again, these are prototype pieces. Some of the art on the cards is prototype, but the general aesthetic of the game is set, and I think it's looking good. So the overall goal of this game is to survive. We are these ragtag Americans holding it together against 500 plus Germans trying to assault this ridge. And we will win the game if we can make it through 4 of these chunky attacker decks of cards. So the game's in 4 rounds. If you live all the way to the end of round 4, you win. It's not going to be that easy though. These are pretty chunky decks of cards. There are also opportunities to pick up extra victory points. There are some objectives that will come in Assault Waves 3 and 4, and you can also try to boost your intelligence counter, we'll talk about how to do that, as a way to get more victory points because you got more information about the Germans out to your side. This is a brutal game, however, and basically it's considered a draw if you lose the game in turn 4, because that's what happened historically. At the actual Battle of Lanzerath Ridge, the Americans held out until nightfall and then got captured. So if it's game over for you during Assault Round 4, you did pretty darn good. It's a lot easier to lose the game, I can say from personal experience, and that will happen when either your morale hits 0, and we'll talk about how that happens, or when at the end of one of your turns, one of the German units is still in one of your spots on the map, because that means that they've breached our lines. And believe me, they will be coming and they will give it a hell of a try. So let's talk a little bit about the setup here for Lanzerath Ridge. Let's go through a few turns to give you a taste for the game, and then hopefully that'll give you a sense of whether or not this is for you. So here's everything that's going on our side, up here at the top of the game board. The rulebook will actually give you very specific setup instructions so you know exactly where to place each unit, but there's special things about them to notice. Let's take a close look at a couple of our pieces. We have here Fort and Fancher. Everyone on the board is going to have a squad, although there are a couple of players who can basically inspire anyone from any squad on the board, but you'll get their name, a picture if one is available, their valor level, which is going to matter for dice rolls when you are doing combat, any special abilities they might have. For example, Fort can operate the radio, and you also get information about what die they roll when they are on the attack. Every one of your guys is also going to have an exhausted side, because when you take a major action, it wipes you out for the entire combat round unless you can unexhaust yourself. A lot of these guys will have special designations, letters on their token to tell you what they can do. So someone with an M can operate a machine gun. Somebody with an A can basically assist others. So they might not be super powerful themselves and they don't have super high value levels like Queen over here at value 2. But this A means that Queen is able to basically sacrifice his own action to give an exhausted person his space a second action. Dustman has a star in the corner, and his color on his stripe matches Unit A, which means that he's able to inspire others in Unit A to fire extra when they attack. So you get an extra die for that. Some of them will have a C, which stands for command, and it allows them to unexhaust other soldiers in their area. And the R labels, so R, RA, and RI, mean something for our vehicles up here. So up here we have the radio. If you move someone who's capable of operating the radio up here, they can basically collect intelligence and then send it away in order to get some intelligence points. Artillery is great because you can get some artillery tokens, spend them all to roll an equivalent number of dice, and then if you get a successful roll, you're actually taking cards out of the assault decks, which means that you can make an assault shorter and therefore make yourself more likely to survive it. And then we also have an M2 with a machine gun on it, and that's just cool. In fact, there are a couple machine guns on the board, and we're going to talk about how to use those in combat, but they are basically awesome and let you take multiple shots at these Germans headed our way. The machine gun ammo is all up here, and again, we'll also talk about how to use that. We're also at least a little bit prepared for this particular assault. There's a barbed wire fence the Germans will pile up against for a bit before moving towards us, so we have one kind of weak line of defense here. And we also have set some booby traps. So basically where there's a dot on the map, you put a grenade. So the first German to advance this far will basically be destroyed by the grenade, and it gives us just a little bit of help as they start trying to march into our actual positions on the map. These dudes are ruthless though, so let's go ahead and just play through a sample turn and see how it all works. I'm just going to keep deck number 1 out, so we don't need the rounds 4, 3, and 2 decks just now. And we won't actually need them for this video because I'm not going to do a full playthrough. I'm trying to respect everybody's time. But here's deck number 1, and I guarantee you it'd have something horrible in it, so let's find out. All right, so let's go ahead and draw some attacker cards and see what they do. This first one, we have a general assault card. So let's take a closer look. One thing that's good about these cards is they really do tell you what to do right at the bottom. So here we have a submachine gunner. We're going to get a token that looks just like this one and put it out on the board. Where we put it is determined by this roll and place banner here at the bottom. What this means is that we're going to roll a d6 and we're going to put it in one of the corresponding tracks with this brown square symbol and the right number. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we're going to put a submachine gunner into one of them. So let's go ahead and roll. And we got a 6. So we know that somebody is coming over here to track 6, which doesn't really have anyone in it, so I might want to do something about that. So let's get our submachine gunner token. And basically what happens is that branches 3 and 4 kind of split up here, and then 5 and 6 do the same thing after the fence. So this is going to build extra pressure on our fences as we move up. So for now, everything's okay. Everybody just moves up 1, and then I put our submachine gunner here at the end of the track. But as we approach this fence, its ability to defend us will kind of start to waver. As more guys come onto this track, the ones that are already there will pile up on top of each other to make room. Once there are 3 tokens stacked, they start to move as a stacked unit, and they will go past your fence and break it. The other way to get through a fence is for a leader to come out onto this track. So if we had leader 6 come out, then the fence will just get snapped and they're just going to keep going. So you have to be attentive to not only places where there's immediate danger, but places where you think some might be arising soon. Let's have a look at our next card. All right, so this time we got an MG42. Again, it's going to tell us what to do at the bottom, thank goodness. So in this case, nothing happens from this card yet exactly, because it says at the bottom, place or activate. If you haven't placed your MG42 yet, then you don't have to activate it. But the second time this card comes around, it's going to fire on our guys and try to disrupt as many of them as possible in the area where it shoots. So we have the square A symbol here. I have the token that has the matching symbol down here in the corner. And there's the spot on the map that says A in a square. So it goes here. Visually, this game is doing a lot to help you figure out where to put stuff, which I really appreciate. You don't have to do a whole lot of cross-checking or anything because it'll tell you, based on the iconography, what to do. So that was all for now. It was uneventful, sort of. And then let's draw a third card. Uh-oh. So this time we got a leader. There's a special token for one. It's right here at the bottom. And then it tells us where to place him. So this one's going to go on to track 4. You roll for more normal units, but the leaders have more even distribution when they come out. So this time you're going to place him on track 4. And that's just automatically where he goes. So let's put this card in discard. We're going to take a leader, and he's headed this direction. This shares part of the track with 3. So what's going to happen is these guys are all going to move up. And now there's a leader on this pathway. What's dangerous about that is that with a leader on this track, when we get more soldiers coming in here, they're all just going to blow right past the fence because the leader enables them to just cross it. So we might want to eliminate him in our turn to give us a little more time on these tracks so these guys don't just bust through the fence the very next turn. So we've drawn and resolved 3 assault cards. That's the enemy round, and it doesn't seem so bad, but that's only because it's the first one. This is going to pile up really, really quickly. All right, so now it's our go, and I'm going to walk you through what you get to do on your turn, or at least what your options are. Then I'm going to talk about some of the things that can happen later in the game to give you a more global perspective on what you're getting. And then we'll call this video to a close. All right, so the enemy phase is done. It's now our turn, and according to the rulebook, that's called the defense phase because we are defending. I've already given you some sense of what we can do based on what's on some of our tokens, talking about machine guns, talking about the vehicles that we have, but let's go through in detail what you're able to do on your turn. These markers down here in the corner mark your 5 actions. You can take no more than 5, but you can take a combination of major actions and minor ones. The difference between them is that a major action will exhaust the token that does the action, but a minor action will just make you put an action point on it so he can't do anything else this turn. If you're exhausted, you are done through the entire rest of this assault deck unless you get unexhausted. Whereas if you just take a minor action, you have an action token on you, but you're good to go next turn, period. So let's talk to the major actions, then the minor ones, and then we'll pick some to do for our turn. The first one obviously is going to be to attack. We are in a battle after all. Attacks are calculated based on line of sight, so you can only attack in areas that match your symbol. So basically these brown squares are able to attack other brown square spots. These purple pentagons can only attack other pentagon spaces. Blue over here can only attack blue, these diamonds, and these orange hexagons can only attack other orange spots. There are a couple of dual line of sight locations on the board that let you go for 2 things at once. But generally you need to make sure you're matching symbol and color, or just symbol if you are colorblind. So you can shoot anything within your line of sight. However, the degree of success you might have is going to vary based on how far the enemies are away from you and whether you're crossing these little white lines on the board, because these represent an addition of distance that's so great that your accuracy is going to drop a little bit. So within the same zone, so on the same side of the white line, when you're rolling an attack roll, you're going to be trying to roll greater than or equal to the number on the spot. So this rifleman is going to be hard to get because he's in spot 7. Same thing for the MG42. You have to be able to roll 7 or higher in order to get it. But then it goes 6, 5, 4, 3. So things get easier to hit as they get closer to you, but that's really the only good thing about them getting closer to you, because generally that sucks. But if you're going to try to shoot across the white lines here, it's going to add a +1 to the die result you need in order to pop off the enemy that you wanted to attack. So Fancher here gets to roll a D8, which means that maybe you do want to try to go for this leader on 6. But Fancher would have to get a perfect 8 in order to hit this rifleman over here in spot 7, because it's 7 plus the 1 for the white line crossed. So this game did a good job of representing how accuracy and line of sight would work in a way that's very simple and visually really clear. You know what to roll based on what's in the bottom right corner for each of your soldiers. So some of them roll a D6, some roll a D8. The machine guns can roll a D10 or even a 12 if they're on their emplaced side. But we're going to talk about that in a moment. The other thing that's nice is if you are in a space with someone who can inspire you. So for example, McConnell is in a space with Dustman, who has the star and is in the same unit as him. McConnell can actually roll 2 dice instead of just 1 when making an attack. So Dustman's mere presence assists everyone around him. Most inspiration is specific to a unit, but Bauk and Slape over here have basically an all-purpose inspirational ability, so whoever they're with is going to fire extra shots because being with them is so great. And you can see why when you read about them historically, they were total badasses. So that's an attack. Another major action you should hope never to have to take is a close combat action. So in a close combat action, you don't have to roll, you're automatically going to succeed at close combat in removing a unit, but it only happens when one of them's in one of your spots with you and they've already attacked you and the game is looking pretty grim. So close combat is something that you have to do if they're in there, because if there is a German in here with you at the end of your turn, then you lose the game immediately. Your next option is adjust fire. What that actually means is be cool and fire a machine gun. In order to fire one of the machine guns, a soldier needs to have an M on his token. If he does not, then he cannot fire the machine gun. Sorry. And machine guns have 2 values. They can hit much better when they are emplaced, but sometimes you need to move them around and you just want to fire on the fly, in which case you flip them over to their dismantled side. And basically you can still fire it, but for less. So this is a D8 on that dismantled side, but if you've emplaced it, it's a D10. You also have to decide how much ammo you're going to fire in advance. All of the weapons available to you in the game start loaded, so the M1919 has 5 ammo to start with, the M2 has 6, and this M1918 over here only has 2. But the danger of having a lot of ammo available to you is the temptation to shoot more than 3 of them. So basically, when you decide that you're going to make an attack with a machine gun, you declare how much ammo you're going to use, and you get to roll the related die for each of those ammos. So if I wanted to try the D10 to get this leader over here in space 6, I might use 2 ammo and try to roll a 7 on one of those dice so I can get him for the 6 plus 1, which wouldn't be a crazy idea at all. After you fire the machine gun, though, you don't actually have to stop. You can keep going. It adds 1 to the dice roll you need, however. So if I don't hit him this first time and I needed 7, if I decide to fire another one at him that I didn't declare before, it'll be 8. So this thing has decreasing returns the more you fire it on one turn. The other thing is that if you use more than 3 ammo on a turn, you have to roll dice for all the extra ammo you used. If you get a 1 on one of those dice, then your machine gun basically gets warped from all the heat and is broken for the rest of the game. So you can run out of ammo. There's never going to be any more. You can reload your machine guns, but you will never get fresh ammo for them. Additionally, if you're getting a little too excited with your machine gun, you will destroy it and then it's no good to you at all anymore. So it doesn't seem too scary here in round 1 when everything is fresh, but by the time you get to assault number 4 and you're in that really nasty deck, some of your machine guns may be destroyed, you won't have any grenades left, your fences will all be broken, and this is basically as good as it's ever going to get. Another major action that you can do is assist. So some of our guys have an A on them, and that means they can assist. So let's say that McConnell has already fired a gun to take somebody out on this row, and he's exhausted. Later, Queen would be able to take an assist action to exhaust himself and unexhaust McConnell. You can still only ever take 1 action per guy per turn, but that would mean that McConnell was available to attack again on the following defender turn. So an assist basically means sacrificing 1 unit's action in order to bring another person back into the fray. A command works very much like in previous Valiant defense games. It lets you unexhaust up to 3 units that are in your area by exhausting yourself. The only thing is that commanders can't unexhaust each other. So let's say that Bauk, James, and Milosevic were already all exhausted and I really wanted to use a command action. I could exhaust Slape and I could unexhaust these 2 guys, but not the other commander. One of your other options is to reposition, and that basically means going all the way across the board or to a completely different spot on the map. So I can take a minor action and just move over here and have it cost me 1 action and I'm not exhausted at all, it's fine. But if I decide that Queen needs to go and be over here with Fancher, I can't just move him that many times in a turn. I might decide it's worth exhausting him just to pop him over here. So you can move somebody anywhere if you're willing to exhaust them. So that's a reposition action. And then in these spaces, you can use major radio and artillery actions, but you don't want to do those right away because you need to do the minor actions first. So I'm going to come back around to this after talking through the basic minor actions, and then we're going to discuss radio and artillery because they're really, really cool, but they're a little bit more complicated than the other ones. So minor actions. We've talked about the things that will actually exhaust you, but minor actions don't do that. They just use up one of your action tokens and the soldier you use it on can't do another action that turn. So minor actions include dismount a weapon. So you can dismount. So let's say that Jenkins wants to dismount this weapon. We would just flip it over and that's 1 action. He's not exhausted. He's good to go next turn, but it took an action this time to actually dismount that weapon. Likewise, if you have a dismounted weapon, it costs you an action to emplace it. So these minor actions will spend the 5 actions that you have on your turn, they just won't exhaust your soldiers. So dismounting and emplacing machine guns are minor actions. Moving is a minor action. So again, like I mentioned, Queen could just come here, not exhaust at all, and put a little token on. So moving 1 space as your minor action is relatively cheap, but if you need to make a big move, you might want to take a major action and reposition instead. So there's one more minor action we need to talk about, and that is recover. Recovery does not work in Lanzerath Ridge the way that it did when you played any other previous Valiant defense games. So if you have experience in this series, then you're gonna have to leave your preconceptions at the door, because it used to be possible, if someone was exhausted, for them to be able to take a recover action and flip themselves back over, and that was just one of your actions for the turn. However, in Lanzerath Ridge, that is not actually an option. The only thing the recover action does for you, which is important, is it can remove a disruption token. Because if you have disruption tokens on any of your guys at the end of the round, then you lose morale. And if you get to 0 morale, then you lose the game. So you do want to be recovering, but all the recovery does is remove one of these disruption tokens. So you could actually take a recovery action if you're exhausted. So we can have our exhausted guy do a recover action to take the disruption token off, but he stays exhausted until the end of the assault wave. So, you've got all these limited resources already, and also you can't just recover and keep going the way you used to be able to do in previous Valiant Defense games. The only way to get somebody from their exhausted side to the refresh side is to either have somebody use one of their assist actions, which is why these guys are so useful, or have one of your commanders use a command action. So make sure that you use those guys really carefully because they can do stuff themselves, but it may be the command action that you need the most. Other than that, the only way to unexhaust your guys is to make it to the end of an assault wave and then reset for the next one, which I'll talk about later in this video. And your last two combat heavy minor actions are reload. So if you're in the same space with a machine gun, then you can take a minor action to reload your ammo up to the max. So the board will actually tell you loaded is 5, 6, and 2. So the spaces on the board will actually give you text to tell you how much you can do. Or you can actually transfer ammo from one weapon to another. So if you bust up your machine gun, you can take another machine gun to the same location and do an ammo transfer. It'll take you some actions, but it can be done. The one rule is that you cannot transfer ammo to or from the M2. It's the one that starts with the most ammo, so naturally that would be the one that you can't transfer ammo to or from, obviously. And then let's talk about the radio and the artillery. So let's say that Springer is going to be over here in the radio artillery, so we can talk about it. And let's put Fort, who has radio intelligence, into this 2 space. So I just use these guys as examples because RI and RA are specific to the intelligence radio and the artillery radio. Bauk has just a regular R on him, and that means that he could actually operate either one, but he's got such a high Valor rating and he has so many other abilities that you might not want to use him that way. That's a choice you'll have to make. But the thing that's interesting about radio actions is that there's actually 2 types. There's the minor action for the radio and then the major action for the radio. So a minor action still takes up an action. So if I want to take an intelligence action up here, I would put an action marker on him, and then I would add a token. So you add these tokens as a minor action to the radio, and that works the same way for both the artillery vehicle and for the intelligence radio. And then what you want to do, if you have the time and the space, is kind of let things pile up a little bit. Get a couple of these little radio tokens, because then what happens is when it's your turn to take an action, you can choose to take a major action and exhaust your guy in order to spend all of these tokens. And when you do that, you take them away and you roll as many d6s as you had tokens. So I've only got 2, so we'd roll this a 3rd time. So roll. All right, so this is a 6. Roll again for a 3. So basically you roll and as many dice as there were tokens piled up here. And then if you get a 5 or a 6, then you get to, in the case of this intelligence radio, increase your intelligence marker. So in this case from 0 to 1, and that's victory points at the end of the game. Alternatively, if you're using the artillery radio, if you have a success on this roll, then you are able to remove assault cards from the assault deck. So essentially you get to just take 3 cards off the top. It's like skipping an entire enemy turn because of your smart artillery use. So it's one of those actions that's worth investing in, and it's kind of fun and tense because you don't want to let too many tokens pile up because, if you could roll a 5 or 6 within 3 of them, then if you had 4, that could have gone towards your next artillery or intelligence action instead. At the same time, if you've only got 1 and then you exhaust yourself and roll up 2, that's not great either. So it's like a little bit of a game of chicken, deciding when you want to really take that roll and see if you, for example, get to remove some Germans from the assault deck. All right, so let's put everybody back and then we'll actually take some actions and we'll talk about a few other aspects of the game. All right, so now everybody's back in starting position. Let's take a couple actions for fun. So the first thing I think I'd want to do is try to take out this leader because he is causing trouble here and here, and I want my fences to stay intact for a little bit longer. So the question is, how do I want to try to get rid of this leader? I'm going to need a 6 to shoot him. And so I could try to take it the simple way. So basically I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to exhaust James here to attack. He gets a D8. Because he's with Balk, who has an Inspire ability, he'll actually roll 2d8. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and exhaust him, and we'll put this on. But we're gonna roll 2d8 to see how he did. So we're gonna roll 2d8. All right, so we actually got it. We have a 4, and then here we have a 6, and we needed a 6 or higher in order to get this leader. So boom, he's off the board. No sadness there. Auf Wiedersehen. And then we still have 4 more actions that we could take because there are 4 action tokens left. So speaking of the radio and all of that, let's start moving some people in from the edges as well. So one thing that we know about this game is that the flanking stuff doesn't start happening until later rounds. So these guys may as well kind of move in and try to help us if that is what we want. So I'm thinking that I'm going to use an action on Jenkins to dismount our machine gun. And then I'm going to use Preston to move it in. So we can carry this over here because movement is a minor action. You can't have more than 4 defenders in a spot, but you know, we're at 4, that's good. And we'll keep this on him. But basically, this guy has now moved with a machine gun. He could choose to place it or have somebody else in the square place it next turn so that we can start firing on this area, which is not a bad idea at all. And then I have 2 more actions. I think that I want to start getting people ready to do radio stuff. So I'm going to just move Springer over 1, and then he's going to move again over to the artillery next turn because I want to start saving up to get rid of some of these cards. I think that's a great idea. And then I have 1 more action. Let's take a shot at this MG42 because these things are nasty, and I'll show actually in a future part of this video how to use these. They're very not fun. But for now, let's pretend that we can knock one out. Or at least we could try. So let's say that, McConnell is going to try to shoot at this MG42 because he's with Dustman and he'll get a second die. So making sure that you are positioned to use that Inspire action is very good. So we're going to exhaust McConnell. And we're going to roll 2d8 to see if we can get a 7 to take out the MG42. Oh, and that actually happened. Yes. All right, so this would be gone. And that would be really good because I'm going to end up placing it out there again when the next card comes around. But it's just putting off the time when suppressive fire is going to destroy me. And so those would be all my actions for the turn. For cleanup, you pick all the action tokens back up. But the exhausted guys stay exhausted. And you're going to have to actually unexhaust them in order for them to do anything again during this assault round. So actions are interesting because they don't always exhaust you, but exhaustion is an extra thing you have to deal with on top of having limited actions. So that's how the turn works. Play 3 of the German assault cards, take 5 actions, and we've detailed what those actions are. Let's just talk about a few other elements of the game, and then we'll consider it an end to this preview. So for the sake of example, let's say that we did not get rid of that MG42. And that we drew a card to activate it next time. If an MG42 is already placed, it will do suppressive fire. So as with many things in this game, we're going to roll a 6-sided die to figure out where it's going to fire. Okay, so in this case, a 6. So it'll be over here and nothing happens. So let's just try that again. A 1. Okay, so this would be really bad because Adams and Krager are sitting here. So if you are using the MG42, what you do is to simulate an attack on this space. For each defender, you're going to roll a 6-sided die. And if you roll something that is equal to or greater than their Valor number, so for Adams it's 3, for Krager it's 5. So if you roll greater than or equal to that number, so Adams a 3, Krager a 5, they become disrupted. If a soldier is already disrupted and he gets hit again, then he dies. Every time you have a casualty, you lose morale. And you also have to deal with your disruption because at the end of an assault round, if you still have disruption tokens on soldiers, you lose the morale for each of those as well. So the game can end really quickly if you're not taking care of your guys. So let's roll for Adams. Okay, so he would be disrupted. So you put a disruption token on him. Krager a 1, now he's good to go. Would that I had rolled, you have to declare who you're rolling for before you roll to keep it fair. The good news is that it doesn't take too much to recover, just an action, but if you only have 5 actions per turn, spending 1 on recovering one of your guys can really hurt, especially as things get nastier down here. So that's the destructive power of an MG42, and things get a little spicier throughout the game. So the first deck is all just assault cards where you're placing more tokens, and MG42 cards where you're placing out these machine guns that do a whole lot of damage. So really, the first assault wave is the easiest one. But of course, it's just there to soften you up for all of the remaining ones. During assault wave 2, you're going to see more of the assault and MG42 cards that you've already seen, but you're also going to see mortars. And mortars basically act the way that MG42s do, except that it isn't based on being in a specific location. So you can destroy an MG42 and put off the day when it's going to make you miserable, but a mortar just appears. So a mortar will either have you roll to figure out the position where you're attacking, or it'll tell you where, but either way, you are going to roll dice to damage and disrupt whoever happens to be there. And again, if a defender already has a disrupted token, then they will become a casualty if they are hit by the mortar. Mortars are horrible because they also attack vehicles. So in this case, you have this 3. This mortar is going after our artillery vehicle. And normally you have to get a 5 or a 6 in order to be successful when you're doing a major action with the artillery vehicle. Once it becomes damaged, you have to roll a 6 if you want to remove cards from the assault deck. So the mortar is definitely not your friend, but it certainly spices things up. Deck 3 is distinctive in that it has a lot more mortars in it, so there are just a little bit of you get just a taste of mortar fire from assault deck number 2. Number 3 has them going off everywhere. They're softening you up for the final nasty assault wave number 4. And then you have deck 4, which is extra horrible because this is the deck that starts to flank you. So in the beginning of the game, you've got enough guys to kind of distribute across all these spaces. You have your machine guns, you've got your booby traps, you've got your fences. So by the time you get to wave 4, typically most of your goodies are going to be gone. You're going to be working with a skeleton crew, just praying to make it through the deck. And, and not only that, but they're going to start coming up the sides as well. So you're going to have to distribute some of your resources that have become more limited to places that you didn't want to have to do that before. Because again, if a German is in one of these spaces, they've breached your lines and you are in trouble. So you have to cover everything and you have a lot fewer resources to cover things with. So it is pretty brutal. That said, if you do lose in wave 4, it is still considered a draw. So I guess there's that. But you always want to beat the game. And this one's really, really tough. The last enemy thing that we should discuss is the one that you don't ever want to have happen, which is what happens if there are enemies in your space. So they're going to attack you once they get in there. So let's say that we'll just say this lone rifleman's in here for now. Or let's make it 2 riflemen to make it exciting. So let's say that these 2 riflemen have made it into our space. What's going to happen is you take the number value on these tokens. So in this case, it's 1 and 1 for a total of 2. But if you've got leaders and submachine gunners and grenadiers and stuff in there, it's worse. But you're going to add up the number on the German tokens and you roll that many 6-sided dice. And then you're going to roll for each defender. So Bash has a valor number of 3. So he would be disrupted because one of these die rolls was greater than or equal to 3. And then Fort also would be disrupted because the Germans got him too. A 4 and a 3 would certainly be enough to overcome his valor number of 3. So if Germans get in the space, it's disastrous, especially if they get in there in a stack, which can happen if they get past your fence. Another thing that's nice about this game is that you get just a little bit of a breather at the end of each attack period. So once you run out of a deck of attackers and you're ready to move on to the next number up, what you're going to do is first you do have to decrease the morale token 1 for each defender that is disrupted. So you'd want to make sure these guys get undisrupted before then so you don't hurt yourself. Then you do get to remove all remaining disrupted tokens and then put them back in the supply. So everybody kind of refreshes for the next round. Anybody who's exhausted will flip back over. So that's good. You get everybody back. So if you want to go all out towards the end of an assault, that kind of makes sense because everybody's gonna flip back over in the refresh point. All your radio tokens get lost, so make sure that you do your radio actions before the end of a round. All your enemy tokens go back in the supply. So if things were looking really gnarly up here, they actually disappear and give you a break. So let's assume we got rid of these guys. But if they were back down here in their original position, they would all just kind of disappear, goodbye. But the machine guns will stay, so those get to persist. And then when you're doing your setup for attack periods 2 to 4, it basically is made to look just like 1. So you put your 10 enemy riflemen back on the board as originally depicted. So basically there's a setup for how they're supposed to look at the beginning of an assault, and you do that. You get to put the fence tokens back if they were removed, like you had a little bit of time to go fix your fences, which is nice. You don't get your grenades back though. You're able to load your ammunition, so you don't get ammunition back, but if you have unloaded machine guns, you can load them back up to full during this time. You get to choose whether you're going to emplace or dismount your weapons. Back, Springer, and Fort are going to come to the log cabin space, so they move. And then everybody else can be redistributed basically according to your wishes. There's only a couple of limitations to that. You can't have defenders start in the 2, 3, or purple 1 combat position, so you don't get to start with a vehicle. You always have to move to your vehicle, which is annoying, but okay, fair enough. And none of your combat positions can have more than 4 defenders. There's also going to be some unique stuff in the setup for 3 and 4 that has to do with your objectives, and that'll be on those objective cards. So basically, you are getting softened up pretty badly in the first 3 rounds, waiting for a really nasty assault round 4. But of course, some really nasty stuff can happen to you before that. However, between rounds, you get just the slightest bit of a breather and a chance to redistribute in preparation for whatever's coming next. The other thing that's going to come into play in waves 3 and 4 are these objective cards. So these are optional objectives that you can choose to try to fulfill in order to boost your game. So in the 4th wave, you can get VP for pulling off some extra stuff. But of course, this would appear at the time of the game when it's the hardest to do anything extra, because you're just trying to make it. Then once you've mastered all of the fineries of the base game, you can start to add in tactic cards. So tactics are optional, but basically you have tactics for assault waves 1, 2, 3, and 4. And for each enemy attack wave, you would draw a tactics card, and it would give you something special, an extra evil that the Germans will do during their chance to encroach on your territory. So in this case, every time you get a rifleman, then you also resolve it twice and you get another rifleman, which is really nasty. So if you're ready to give yourself an extra challenge, the tactics are there for you. There are also some variants in the back of the rulebook for you to try if you want even more variety in your game. So that is an overview of Lanzerath Ridge, designed by David Thompson, coming to Kickstarter on December 14th from Dan Versen Games. I will say that I really, really like this one. In some ways, I think it may be the best value defense game yet. Pavlov's House has still got my heart, but I think after repeated plays of this one, I'm going to be very, very fond of it. I like some of the mechanical changes that have been made to the game. I think that it's a really nice, refreshing take on a system that we're in game number 4 of, so I'm really happy to see some new life breathed in. And if you like the Valiant Defense series already, or if you're looking to try one, I think this is a really good choice. So thanks for watching, everyone, and happy gaming.